The first speaker we've got is Professor Essa Suleman from CSIR, one of your locals. And he's going to be talking about one of those sort of hazards that exist within a food sector, in this case in tilapia farming.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm just going to escape out of this.
Okay, morning everybody. Thanks for attending the session. So I'm going to talk a little bit about diseases affecting the aquaculture industry, particularly tilapia lake virus and ISKNV, infectious spleen and kidney necrosis virus. But I'm also going to try and give some context and link it to some of the things that Grant has already touched on, and give a broader context to why are we so interested in disease diagnostics and developing novel technologies for the aquaculture industry. So I think many of you are familiar with this kind of concept of One Health, that the health of human beings, the health of the environment, and the health of animals are all interconnected. And we cannot address health problems without having a unified multidisciplinary approach that requires inputs and efforts from all sectors, the medical, veterinary, and environmental. And things like climate change affect everything. They have multiple knock-on effects. And the Grant has gone into quite a bit of nice detail expanding the one food concept, but really these two are interconnected, and we need to think differently. And food is the central thing of everything that we do. It's central to our lives in all systems and plays a big role. And if we are able to have better food production systems and reduce the burden of disease in those systems, then obviously that's going to have a knock-on effect on human health and environmental health. So, some of the hazards that Grant was talking about. So in terms of that, CSIR, and particularly our group, is really focused on how do we develop technologies in a One Health approach that addresses some of these particular issues. So our key focus is on these three sort of areas of the health value chain. How do we look at prevention of disease, diagnosis of disease, and treatment of disease, particularly in the veterinary space? So we develop vaccines for veterinary and zoonotic diseases, and these are plant-based vaccines, mRNA vaccines, and then we're looking at development of novel diagnostics and technologies to detect disease. And then future is looking at biotherapeutics and custom genomics to develop novel technologies, again, for treatment of disease. Now, again, many of you are familiar with this One Health sort of diagram. And for us, we believe that while disease is central, if you look at host, environment, and pathogen, or environmental health, human health, and animal health, the ability to detect disease is central to that and be able to diagnose, because once you're able to detect a particular disease, then you can have different treatment or interventions to manage that particular disease. And our area here, our focus and looking at, is to develop novel technologies in diagnostics and vaccines targeting human and animal and environmental diseases that are relevant to the South African and the rest of to South Africa and the rest of the continent. And that means that we are looking at having an impact to improve human and animal health via better food production systems, and also reduce the burden of disease. And then specifically on the aquaculture sector is how do we grow the aquaculture sector in terms of this blue economy, and which will have then positive socioeconomic impacts. And related to that as well is improve biosafety and biosecurity. And some of the things that we do are very closely aligned to various government policies, the DSI Decadal Plan, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Africa Agenda, the Bioeconomy Strategy, the Blue Economy Strategy, the Biosecurity Hub. All of that is tied to what we as CSR do in terms of veterinary diagnostics and vaccines development. And I'm just focusing today on the aquaculture part of it, but there's a much broader context in terms of the things that we do here at CSIR. So again, the blue economy, many of you may have heard this concept, but it's really around unlocking the value of our ocean economy, and not just ocean economy, but also inland water production or food production systems. And if you look at this, oceans are a primary source of income for 3 to 5% of, and accounts for 3 to 5% of the world's GDP. And Ocean-based jobs are expected to increase between about 120% between now or 2010 and 2030. And fisheries and aquaculture is a significant portion of the world's population depend on their livelihoods through the aquaculture industry. And then also the oceans are a good source of heat storage. And we know that with warming oceans, there's climate change, and that has, again, knock-on effects on aquaculture industry and also other systems as well. So I think Grant touched on some of this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but really what highlight is that aquaculture production is increasing significantly and as I think Grant also touched this, that we are on an inflection point where aquaculture production is now exceeding significantly, traditional capture production. But there are important additional aspects that I would like to highlight, particularly around this, and even Grant touched on it, that animal protein is about 40% of global human diet, but of that, aquatic foods make about 7%. And what's interesting to note is that trade flows of aquatic products by region, so basically imports of aquatic products into Africa, is significant. So we need to try and reverse that. So we want outflows, we want exports rather than relying on imports. And if you look again also at this data, Africa, in terms of contribution of aquatic foods to animal protein supply per capita, is very, very low, even in Southern Africa. And there is a strong push to how do we grow this bioeconomy and grow this blue economy to ensure that aquaculture or food, fish products are increased in per capita consumption. So tilapia is a growing industry. It's valued at about $7.9 billion to $12 billion per annum. And Nile tilapia is traditionally the most preferred product. And this is just the breakdown: frozen fish, whole fish, fresh fillets. And that's the type of products that we consume in terms of aquaculture. Again, tilapia production is significantly increasing towards aquaculture-based rather than capture-based. You can see this is fairly stagnant for the last 20, 30 years, whereas aquaculture production is now around 6.5 million tons per annum, and it's growing significantly at around 6%, $1.9 billion per annum, and for 2020, estimated growth rate is 5.1%. But the market is fragmented. There's other issues, and that we'll talk about in a minute. Particularly disease. So freshwater production is hampered by a need for rapid diagnostics. There's two particular viruses, tilapia lake virus and infectious spleen and kidney necrosis virus, that pose significant threats to the aquaculture industry and production. So TILV has a mortality rate of about 85%, ISKNV 50 to 80% mortality, and this results in significant economic losses. In Egypt, they lose about $100 million annually, or 98,000 metric tons just to these two viruses alone. Sub-Saharan Africa, TILV affects 6 million jobs directly and 18 million livelihoods indirectly. Again, in Sub-Saharan Africa, greater than 400 million lives may be affected by food insecurity, with losses of about $3 billion per year due to these particular viruses. And one of the challenges that, again, we as CSIR is around developing novel technologies and then licensing out those technologies to suitable partners. And part of the challenge with these two viruses, ISKNV and TILV, is that there are no commercially or widely available commercially diagnostic kits to detect these viruses. So farmers have to rely on pathology and other methods, which can be time consuming and which can also be problematic in a way in terms of time and cost, etc. So you may have an outbreak and you then have significant losses before the virus is successfully characterized. And there's a need for novel, rapid diagnostic technologies to detect these viruses and other pathogens affecting the aquaculture industry. So at CSIR, we developed diagnostics for tilapia lake virus and ISKNV. And so we've got 2 real-time PCR assays, one based on cyber-green technology and one based on TACMAN technology. And again, you may ask, why 2 technologies? And the idea is that, again, different labs may have different instruments. Some instruments may be able to run cyber-green chemistry, some instruments may be able to run TACMAN chemistry. So the idea is that you have a wide variety of technologies, availability of technologies that have maximum reach and maximum impact. And our assays, we believe, are quite sensitive. They range down to about 1 to 10 copies of the viral genome. We've completed field trials of these technologies in Ghana, and we believe that they're currently at TRL 6. The ISKNV assay is a nested PCR assay, so it's 3 conventional assays, 1 nested PCR, and again, they have a detection limit of around 10 copies of the viral genome. And I'm just going to talk briefly about our broader program in terms of aquaculture diagnostics and the long-term vision of how we actually support the aquaculture industry in South Africa and across the rest of the continent. So phase 1 it was basically around development of the diagnostic kits for TILV and ISKNV, which is now basically complete. But we are looking at an expanded field trial in Brazil, India, Ghana, Egypt, and Malawi to build a better economic model for licensing and commercialization of the technology. And hopefully that will be completed by 2023. And one of the other areas that we as CSIR are developing is this lab-on-chip technology platform, which is a portable microfluidics-based technology that enables point-of-care diagnostics. So again, we did work in Ghana, and one of the challenges was getting samples from the field or from the farms to the labs. It takes hours to get to the farms, hours to collect the samples, hours to get back to the lab, and then a day or 2 to analyze the samples and generate results. So you're looking at probably a few days between sample collection and results. And again, that means that if there's an outbreak, there's losses associated with that. So time is money. So how do we reduce the time from diagnosis to or sample collection to result? And that's where this lab-on-chip technology comes in. And we're developing this lab-on-chip platform to enable field-friendly point-of-care diagnostics, and that's phase 2 of the program. Phase 3 is really around establishing a WOA reference laboratory at CSIR for TILV and other diagnostics of aquaculture-related pathogens to support the local industry and support the rest of the African continent. And obviously that will help to show freedom from disease and enable broader access to markets. And then in summary, the blue economy and aquaculture industry are important avenues for growth. I think this has been quite clearly mentioned in various government policy documents. And the industry is growing, but in South Africa, it's still very, very nascent, and disease and other challenges are a problem. And we don't know if we have TILV or ISKNV in South Africa. We assume that we don't. And having these technologies now available will help us as a country and show that we have freedom from disease. And freedom from disease then enables you to access lucrative export markets, because many of the markets are looking at showing that you don't have these viruses because they want to protect their own industry. And it also gives South Africa as a country the availability of these technologies enables better disease diagnostics, reduce burden of disease, access to import markets, and then improve biosafety and security. South Africa now has the ability to detect these viruses and these pathogens that may threaten our industry as well. Thank you.